Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that fills a room when two people have stopped reaching for each other. That kind of silence had crept into Elena's marriage over the past year, slow, quiet, invisible at first. She noticed it most in the small things: meals eaten without eye contact, conversations that never went beyond logistics, kisses that felt like muscle memory. Her husband Daniel was not cruel. He was just distant, a man more in love with order than with passion. They had built a life together, one that looked perfect from the outside. A townhouse with hardwood floors, a golden retriever named Max, weekend brunches with friends. But somewhere along the way, something had gone missing, and that's when Jason reappeared. He had once been just an old college friend, someone who'd fallen off her radar after graduation, who used to make her laugh so hard she cried. She ran into him by chance at a bookstore downtown one gray Tuesday afternoon. The encounter felt accidental, harmless. But it wasn't. He remembered everything about her. The way she used to sing under her breath while studying. The tattoo on her wrist she always hid from her parents. The time she cried over a film they watched in philosophy class. They got coffee. Just coffee. Then they kept getting coffee. Jason listened when Daniel didn't. He asked about her dreams, not just her schedule. He remembered her favorite authors, sent her songs that reminded him of her. She told herself it was just friendship, that she needed someone to talk to. But she knew better. It wasn't a single moment that changed everything. It was dozens of small ones, like the first time his hand brushed hers across a cafe table and she didn't move away. Or the time they walked under the rain without umbrellas, laughing like teenagers. Or the day she caught herself smiling at a text from him while sitting across from Daniel at dinner. One afternoon, when Daniel was home working upstairs, Jason came by to drop off a book she'd mentioned wanting. She hadn't planned to let him in, but the sky opened up and he came inside, rain-soaked and apologetic. She handed him a towel, laughing. "You always bring weather with you." Jason looked at her for a second too long. "And you always make the room warmer." That silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. When he stepped closer, her breath hitched. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "You haven't yet," he replied, voice low. He reached for her waist, gently, pulling her toward him like she was gravity itself. Her heart was pounding, not just from fear, but from something that had been missing in her life for too long. The feeling of being seen. Daniel was just one floor up. She could hear him walking across the room above them. It made the moment heavier, more real. It wasn't about recklessness. It was about a choice she didn't know she had already made. Jason leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "Tell me to stop," he said, but she didn't. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry or wild like the movie said it would be. It was slow, tentative, like the kind of kiss you give when you're afraid of what it might mean. When their lips finally met, Elena forgot about the ceiling above her, about the steady footsteps of her husband, the hum of the dishwasher, the neat rows of framed vacation photos on the wall. She remembered how it felt to be wanted. Jason pulled back, resting his forehead on hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, breath shaky. "So am I," she whispered back. And she meant it, but not for the reason she thought she would. He left quietly, the door clicking shut behind him like closing of a chapter that had just begun. Upstairs, Daniel was still pacing, probably on another Zoom call. He didn't ask who had visited. He didn't notice her flushed cheeks or trembling hands when she came up later to ask if he wanted dinner. His eyes were on a spreadsheet. "Sure," he said, distracted. "Whatever is easy." Days passed. She didn't see Jason. No text. No calls. He vanished again, as if his presence had only been a brief surge in her life, a flash of color in an otherwise grayscale routine. But something inside her had shifted. She found herself walking slower through the house, touching walls like She was learning this space for the first time. She looked at Daniel differently, not with hate, not even disappointment, just clarity. They had stopped growing together. Their lives had become parallel lines, close, but never crossing. One evening, while folding laundry, she found one. Of Daniel's shirts, still smelling faintly like his cologne. She held it in her hands and felt nothing. Not hate, not love, just silence. Jason texted a week later. I'm sorry for putting you in that position. I shouldn't have come. She stared at the message for 10 minutes before replying. You didn't put me anywhere. I chose it. A minute later, another buzz. I miss you. And before she could stop herself, she typed, come by. Please. The second time was harder because this time she wasn't caught off guard. She had made the invitation. She had wanted him to come. Jason didn't kiss her right away when he arrived. He just stood there in the entryway looking at her like she was both a memory and a possibility. Like he was scared of what touching her again might mean. You sure? He asked softly. No, she admitted, but I'm here. So he stayed. They didn't do anything that night except talk. For hours. About who they were, who they used to be, what they had become. About love, loneliness, mistakes, and how sometimes you can live in a house and still feel like a stranger. Jason told her he had never wanted to be that guy, the one who took someone else's wife. But every time he saw her, he remembered the girl who once dreamed about moving to Europe, writing novels, and dancing barefoot in public. You stopped being that person, he said gently. And I hated watching it. So did I, she whispered. The affair didn't explode like in the movies. It wasn't a scandal. It was a slow unraveling, a quiet pulling away from the life she had known. She didn't confess to Daniel, not at first. She couldn't. She tried to repair things, briefly. She suggested date nights, cooking together, weekend hikes. He obliged, but with the kind of robotic politeness that made her feel even lonelier. He didn't touch her with hunger. He didn't ask questions. He didn't notice when she cried softly in the shower. And one evening, after weeks of pretending, she finally looked at him across the table and said, Are you happy? He looked confused. What do you mean? Do you still want this? She asked. Us? He was silent for a long time. I don't know. Neither did she. Eventually, she told him, not everything. But enough. I've been seeing someone, she said one rainy night, voice trembling. It didn't mean to happen, but it did. And I can't lie anymore. She expected yelling, accusations, rage. Instead, Daniel looked down at his hands and said quietly, I think we both stopped showing up a long time ago. And that was the end of them. No slammed doors, no screaming. Just the quiet sound of a house losing the last of its heartbeat. Jason didn't move in right away. They took it slow. He was patient. Kind. Present. There were days when Elena still doubted herself, still looked at the empty side of the bed and wondered if she had made a mistake. Love born from infidelity carries a shadow, even when it's real. But each time Jason looked at her, touched her, chose her, she felt something honest. Not perfect, but real. One afternoon, months later, they stood by the ocean, watching the tide roll in. She turned to him and said, Are you afraid? Of what? That we started wrong. Jason smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Maybe, but I'd rather start wrong than never start at all. And she believed him, because for the first time in years, she was living her life with her eyes open. No silence. No pretending. Just love, scarred, imperfect, and true. The quiet love Elena had found with Jason wasn't always easy. After the initial intensity wore off, the rush of secrecy, the deep conversations, the raw emotional intimacy, they found themselves facing the everyday realities they had once escaped. They moved in together into a small, sun-drenched apartment near the edge of the city. The walls were bare for months. Elena brought very little from her old life. A couple of books, a few clothes, and a teacup she couldn't part with. Jason, ever the dreamer, had decorated the place with little plants, watercolor paintings, and post-it notes that said things like, "We're better now, and you're here, you're safe." For a while, it worked. They made pancakes on Sundays, took evening walks with no destination, made love in quiet, thoughtful ways that felt like healing. There was a gentleness to the way Jason loved her, patient, open-hearted, without judgment. But healing isn't a straight line, and love born from breaking sometimes carries invisible bruises. One night, while folding laundry, Elena found a familiar ache rising inside her. It wasn't regret. Not exactly. It was grief. Grief for the version of herself that used to believe in certainty, in lifelong promises. In forever, Jason noticed her silence. "Bad day?" he asked. She nodded. "It just hits me sometimes that I left an entire life behind, that I became the kind of person I never thought I'd be." He sat beside her, pulling her close. "You're not defined by a single choice, but I'm changed by it," she whispered. "Aren't we both?" He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Yes, and I'd still choose you, even knowing everything." Still, cracks formed. Elena began working again, a part-time writing job for a local nonprofit. Jason picked up photography gigs that took him out of town sometimes. They no longer spent every evening tangled on the couch. Some nights, she went to bed before he got home. Other times, she sat up late staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. One night, after a long silence at dinner, she finally asked, "Do you think we're strong enough?" Jason looked up from his plate. "I think we're honest. That counts for something. But is it enough?" "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I know I'm still choosing you." Every day, she bit her lip. "Even on the days I doubt myself?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Especially on those days." Months turned into a year. Daniel moved out of their old townhouse. He sold it. Sent her a message when he got remarried. Short, polite. There was no bitterness, only a final thread of closure. She didn't reply. Elena started writing again, really writing. She turned her story into fiction, threading her emotions into pages that didn't bear her name. A publisher picked it up. Her editor called it raw, conflicted, heartbreakingly human. And it was, because love after betrayal isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about making peace with it, living honestly with the cracks in the foundation, and deciding again and again to build something anyway. One night, as rain pattered against the windows, Jason came home late and found her sitting by the window, reading old journal entries. He sat beside her, pulled the blanket over both their shoulders, and whispered, "You still bite your lip when you're thinking." She smiled. "You still remember things that don't matter." "They matter to me." And there, in that quiet apartment with the scent of old books and soft rain in the air, they didn't need grand gestures. No perfect endings, just the choice to stay. And for them, that was love. Their apartment still smelled like fresh coffee in the morning and lavender in the evenings. The walls were no longer bare. They had framed moments now. Candid photos Jason took of Elena while she read by the window. Old postcards from places they swore they'd visit together. Dried flowers taped to corners of mirrors. They had found a rhythm. A fragile, evolving, very real rhythm. But one afternoon, while Elena was organizing a drawer in the bedroom, she found something unexpected. A photo strip from a long-forgotten booth. Her and Daniel, smiling. Young. Before the silence, before the distance, before everything cracked open. Her breath caught, not because she missed him, but because she finally saw them, her and Daniel, for what they were. Two people trying to love each other the only way they knew how, even if it wasn't enough. Even if it ended in heartbreak. She put the photo down and quietly closed the drawer. Later that evening, Jason noticed something different in her. He always noticed, even the things she tried to hide. "Want to talk about it?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Arms crossed in that way he did when he was listening with his whole body. She nodded. "I found an old photo of me and Daniel." His brow furrowed, not in jealousy, but in empathy. "And I don't feel guilt anymore," she said slowly, like she was discovering the truth mid-sentence. "Just sadness for who I was, for what we thought we could be." Jason crossed the room and sat beside her. "It's okay to grieve the version of yourself you outgrew," he said gently. "We don't always choose when we change, just who we become after." They started going to therapy together. Not because they were broken, but because they didn't want to repeat old mistakes. They learned how to disagree without leaving wounds, how to apologize without conditions, how to give space without withholding love. Jason learned to step back when Elena retreated into her thoughts, trusting she would come back. Elena learned to speak when she wanted to run, to say things like, "I'm scared," or "I don't know what I need yet, but please stay close." They became more than just a love born from an affair. They became partners. One rainy Sunday, Elena got an email from her publisher. Her novel, the fictionalized version of her story, had been long-listed for a major award. She stared at the screen in disbelief, her heart racing. Jason came into the room moments later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "What's that look?" he asked. Already smiling. She turned the screen to him and whispered, "It's real. It's actually happening." He beamed. "I told you the world needs your voice." She laughed through sudden tears. "You were the first person who ever made me believe that." "No," he said, setting the mugs down. "You were. I just reminded you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like something precious, something earned. And in that moment, surrounded by rain, books, the hum of the heater, the soft murmur of a dog sleeping by the couch, Elena felt peace. Not perfection. Not a fairy tale. Just real, flawed, human love. The kind that fights to stay. The kind that grows through honesty and forgiveness. The kind that doesn't erase the past, but learns from it. She had loved too. Men in her life. One taught her what it meant to be responsible. The other taught her what it meant to be free. But only with Jason did she learn what it meant to be whole. It had been 2 years, 7 months, and 12 days since the first time Jason touched her, since he placed a hand at her waist. Not knowing how deeply he would shift the axis of her world. Now, his touch didn't surprise her. It centered her. They moved together through their home like 2 people who had learned each other's rhythms. The sound of Elena's laugh when she read something ridiculous online. The way Jason tapped his fingers on the countertop when he was deep in thought. The way her breath slowed when she fell asleep against his chest, as if her body trusted his entirely. Passion wasn't just in the moments they kissed. It was in how they looked at each other. When they didn't. One late evening in early spring, they returned home from a dinner downtown. The city was still warm from the day's sun, and Elena was glowing, cheeks pink, her eyes alive from wine and laughter, and the way Jason hadn't stopped touching her hand beneath the table. He unlocked the door and let her in first, watching the sway of her dress as she kicked off her heels and sighed with contentment. "I haven't laughed that hard in months," she said, dropping her clutch on the table. Jason leaned in behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing his face into the crook of her neck. "You've always had the best laugh," he whispered, "but I think it sounds different when you're free." She turned to face him, her fingers resting lightly at his collar. "I never knew how heavy I was carrying myself before you," she said softly. "How much I'd stopped breathing." He brushed a thumb along her cheekbone. "You're radiant when you're fully yourself. And every day I wake up next to you, I feel like I'm watching the sunrise." The words landed deeply, not because they were poetic, but because he meant them. Every syllable. She reached up, kissed him slowly, purposefully, with the kind of heat that had nothing to do with impulse and everything to do with devotion. They moved through the house like they were remembering it all over again. The way the hallway light fell softly on their skin. The familiar creak of the floorboard just outside the bedroom door. The quiet rustle of cotton sheets as they sank into them, lips never parting. This was no longer a love shrouded in secrecy. There was No guilt. No hesitation. Just the electric pulse of knowing each other, choosing each other, again and again. He kissed her with reverence. Her hands were sure on his skin, pulling him closer, memorizing the planes of his body as if she hadn't. Already mapped them 100 times. But tonight, it felt like rediscovery. He whispered her name like a prayer. She moaned his like it was a vow. Their bodies moved in a language no one had taught them. Only time, tenderness, and truth could have shaped something so fluid, so real. After, they lay tangled beneath the sheets, the windows open to the sound of night, distant traffic, the rustle of trees, the soft rhythm of breath. Jason ran a hand through her hair, his voice barely a murmur. I still think about how we got here, he said. Everything that had to break. Everything we had to face. You could have walked away from it all. Elena lifted her head, tracing a line along his collarbone with her finger. I did walk away, she whispered. But toward you. He kissed her forehead and held her a little tighter. The warmth between them wasn't just from the night's passion, it was from years of learning how to stay, from the courage it took to build something that mattered. There would still be hard days where the past echoed louder than they liked. Days where doubt crept in, when old guilt tried to reopen doors they had shut, but they had built something worth protecting. Not just a love story born from chance and longing, but a love forged in honesty, commitment, and the brave act of choosing each other even when it wasn't easy, even when it required growth, even when it asked for forgiveness. Elena had never imagined she would fall so deeply, not after what she'd done, not after what she'd lost. As Jason reached for her again, their bodies already pulling each other back into the warmth of what they had created, she realized this wasn't falling. This was home.